The Silent Mansion. The first notes Olivia Mercer played on the neglected Steinway grand piano produced a hollow, discordant sound that echoed through the cavernous music room. She winced, her trained ear immediately cataloguing the extensive work needed. This wasn't just out of tune, this was an instrument that had been abandoned. "I warned you it was in poor condition," said Mrs. Hartwell, the stern-faced housekeeper who had greeted Olivia at the wrought-iron gates of Reed Manor 30 minutes earlier. "Mr. Reed hasn't allowed anyone to touch it in 7 years. Olivia ran her fingers along the dusty fallboard, feeling the fine grain of the wood beneath years of neglect. "It's criminal to leave a Steinway Model D in this state. This isn't just any piano, this is musical royalty." Mrs. Hartwell's expression softened slightly. "It belonged to his grandfather, a concert pianist." Olivia nodded, understanding the weight of history in the instrument. "Well, I'll need at least 3 weeks to restore it properly. The soundboard might have cracks, the hammers will need reshaping, and that's before we even talk about regulation and voicing." Mr. Reed said to give you whatever time you need. "The Foundation's anniversary gala is in 4 weeks, and he's insisted this piano be the centerpiece, though heaven knows why. He never comes in here." As the housekeeper left, Olivia removed her jacket and rolled up the sleeves of her simple cotton blouse. The mansion was unnervingly quiet, 50 rooms she'd been told, and seemingly no one in them except Mrs. Hartwell and a few invisible staff members. And somewhere, the mysterious Nathaniel Reed, tech genius and philanthropist who had purchased the historic estate 5 years ago but rarely entertained visitors. Olivia began her assessment, carefully removing the piano's action to examine the internal components. She hummed softly as she worked, an old habit that helped her concentrate. Her small restoration company, Mercer Musical Revivals, had earned a reputation for quality craftsmanship, but this was by far the most impressive residence she'd ever worked in. "Bach's Prelude in C major," came a quiet voice from the doorway. Olivia, startled, nearly dropping a hammer. A tall figure stood partially in shadow, a man with dark hair and serious eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. "I'm sorry," Olivia said, brushing dust from her hands. "I didn't realize anyone was listening. You were humming it." The man stepped forward, his expensive but understated clothes marking him as someone who didn't need to impress. "That's what my grandfather used to play first every morning. He said it cleared the mind." Realization dawned. "Mr. Reed, I'm Olivia Mercer." "Nathaniel," he corrected, though his tone remained formal. He approached the piano but stopped several feet away, as if reluctant to come closer. "Can it be saved?" "Every piano can be saved with enough care," Olivia replied with quiet confidence. "It has good bones. Your grandfather chose well." A flicker of emotion crossed his face. "He did. Though I'm not sure why I've kept it all these years." "Because it's part of your history," Olivia said simply. "Instruments carry memories in their wood and wire. They absorb the music played on them." For a moment, Nathaniel seemed to consider her words, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected intensity. Then just as quickly, the moment passed and his expression became businesslike again. "Mrs. Hartwell will show you to your accommodations. I've arranged for you to stay in the East Wing during the restoration. It seemed more practical than commuting. 2 hours each way." "That's very generous, but it's not generosity, Ms. Mercer. It's efficiency." His tone brooked no argument. "The gala is important to the Reed Foundation. I need this done properly." With that, he turned and left, his footsteps fading down the marble hallway. Olivia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. There was something about Nathaniel Reed that felt like a piano, with its strings too tightly wound, tension barely contained, waiting either to make magnificent music or snap completely. As she returned to her work, Olivia's fingers traced the manufacturer's signature inside the piano. Whoever Nathaniel Reed had been before becoming a reclusive billionaire, he had once cared about this instrument. And in her experience, people who loved music never truly stopped. They just sometimes forgot how to listen. Resonant strings. Morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced above the piano as Olivia worked. 3 days into the restoration, she had established a rhythm: arrive in the music room at 7, break for lunch. At noon, when Mrs. Hartwell insisted, and work until her fingers grew stiff in the evening. The East Wing guest suite was luxurious beyond anything she'd experienced, but it was in this room, with her tools spread across a velvet ottoman, that she felt most at home. Today she was restringing the bass section, a delicate process requiring complete concentration. The piano's voice was slowly returning, each new string adding depth to its emerging tone. She had removed her shoes hours ago, preferring to feel the cool marble floor beneath her feet as she moved around the instrument. "You're making progress," came a voice from the doorway. Olivia looked up to see Nathaniel Reed leaning against the frame, coffee cup in hand. Unlike their first meeting, today he wore a simple charcoal sweater and dark jeans that made him appear almost approachable. "Good morning, Mr. Reed." "Nathaniel," he corrected again. "May I observe?" Olivia nodded, returning her attention to the piano. "I'm restringing the bass section. These original strings were quality copper-wound steel, but they've oxidized over time." He approached, keeping a careful distance that seemed calculated to avoid disturbing her work. "And these new ones? Hand-wound by a family workshop in Germany, 3 generations of expertise in every coil." Olivia gently secured another string, adjusting the tension with practiced movements. "I could use something less expensive, but—" "No," Nathaniel interrupted. "Use the best, always." A small smile touched her lips. "That's my philosophy too, which surprises some clients who think I should cut corners because no one will notice." "You would notice," he observed quietly. "Yes." She looked up, finding his gaze steady on her face rather than her work. "And so would the piano." Something softened in his expression. "My grandfather used to say instruments have souls." "I believe they do," Olivia said, turning back to her task. "This one's been lonely." A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with unspoken thoughts. Nathaniel set his coffee on a side table and wandered to the windows, looking out across the immaculately maintained gardens. "You don't act intimidated by all this," he finally said, gesturing vaguely at their surroundings. Olivia threaded another string through the piano's plate. "Should I be?" "Most people are. I'm too busy being intimidated by this Steinway to worry about the house," she replied honestly. "Besides, grand mansions are just buildings. This piano has history, emotion, art embedded in its very structure." Nathaniel turned, studying her with newfound interest. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone in formal attire with white gloves? Someone who would fawn," he admitted. "Everyone seems to these days." Olivia tested the resonance of her newly installed string with a gentle strike. "Well, I'm afraid I save my reverence for masterfully crafted instruments, not bank accounts." She paused, realizing her bluntness might have been inappropriate. "I apologize if that sounded disrespectful." To her surprise, Nathaniel's face relaxed into what might almost be called a smile. "It's refreshing, actually, especially since I suspect you mean it." Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Hartwell announcing lunch, and Nathaniel excused himself to a conference call. But the next morning, Olivia found a small wooden box on top of the piano, containing a set of vintage piano tuning tools, clearly antique, but in excellent condition. A handwritten note simply read, "Grandfathers, might be useful." Over the following days, a pattern emerged. Nathaniel would appear in the doorway with coffee or tea, ask questions about her progress, and sometimes linger for 20 minutes or more. He never touched the piano, but watched with undisguised fascination as Olivia coaxed it back to life, piece by piece. One afternoon, as she played test chords on a partially restored section, she looked up to find him with eyes closed, lost in the sound. "You understand music," she observed. His eyes opened, something vulnerable flashing across his face before disappearing. "Once," he admitted. "A lifetime ago." "The piano remembers," Olivia said softly, "even if you don't play anymore." That evening, after Olivia had retired to the East Wing, she was startled by faint notes echoing through the hallways. Following the sound, she stopped outside the music room, its doors slightly ajar. Through the crack, she could see Nathaniel sitting at the piano, his fingers hovering uncertainly above the keys. He pressed one note, then another, his posture rigid with what looked like either fear or longing. He played a simple C major scale, halting and unpracticed. Then, closing the fallboard gently, he stood and left through another door. Olivia retreated, silently to her room, her heart beating quickly. The technical work of restoration was proceeding well, but she was beginning to suspect that there was more than one restoration happening within these walls. Nathaniel Reed might present himself as a tech billionaire who'd left music behind, but his eyes, when he heard those notes, told a different story. As she fell asleep that night, Olivia found herself wondering what had silenced his music in the first place, and whether the Steinway under her care might help him find it again. One thing was becoming clear. Beneath his reserved exterior and imposing reputation, Nathaniel Reed was as complex and nuanced as any finely crafted instrument. And like the piano she was restoring, perhaps he too was waiting for someone patient enough to hear the music still locked inside. Unexpected duet. The piano's transformation was remarkable after 2 weeks of Olivia's devoted care. Gone was the discordant hollowness. In its place, warm tones resonated through the music room with increasing clarity. Today, she was focusing on the action regulation, the precise adjustment of each key's mechanical components to ensure perfect responsiveness. "Try this one," she said, not looking up as Nathaniel entered the room. She'd grown accustomed to his daily visits, could recognize his footsteps now. He approached cautiously. "Middle C, please. I need to check the let-off distance." Nathaniel hesitated only briefly before pressing the key with surprising delicacy. Olivia watched the hammer's motion critically, then made a minute adjustment with her regulating tool. Again, "Please," he complied, and this time she nodded with satisfaction. "Perfect. Now the B flat below it." As they continued this collaboration, Olivia noticed how naturally his fingers curved over the keys, how he instinctively understood the touch required. After the 5th note, she couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. "You were more than just someone who appreciated music, weren't you?" she asked quietly. "Your hands remember the keyboard." Nathaniel withdrew his hand as if burned. "A long time ago." Olivia continued her adjustments, keeping her tone conversational. "My grandmother used to say playing piano is like riding a bicycle. The muscle memory stays with you." "Your grandmother was mistaken," he replied, though without heat. "Some things can be forgotten, intentionally forgotten perhaps," she countered, glancing up to find his dark eyes watching her intently. "But rarely lost completely." A charged silence hung between them before Nathaniel abruptly changed the subject. "How did you become a piano restorer? It's an unusual profession." Olivia allowed the diversion. "My father repaired instruments in a small shop in Providence. I grew up surrounded by disassembled pianos, violins with their bellies open, brass instruments in various states of repair." She smiled at the memory. "While other kids had playrooms, I had a workshop full of mysteries." and you followed in. His footsteps? Not immediately. I studied piano performance at Juilliard first. This visibly surprised him. You're a concert pianist? Was, she corrected. I discovered I loved bringing instruments back to life more than performing. There's something profound about restoration, finding the voice that was always there, just waiting. She paused, then added softly, sometimes instruments need someone to believe in them again. Nathaniel's gaze lingered on her face before moving to the piano. And people? Even more so, she replied simply. The afternoon light was fading when Olivia finished the regulation. She stretched her stiff shoulders and stood back from the piano with satisfaction. Would you like to try it? The action is balanced now. It should respond evenly across the keyboard. Nathaniel shook his head. I wouldn't know how to judge it properly. I think you would. She stepped aside, gesturing to the bench. Please? For a moment, she thought he would refuse again. But something in her invitation, perhaps its simplicity, its lack of pressure, seemed to reach him. With obvious reluctance, he sat at the bench, adjusting its height with the practiced motion of someone who had done so countless times before. His hands hovered over the keys, uncertainty written in every line of his body. Then, almost imperceptibly, he relaxed his shoulders and placed his fingers on the keyboard. The first few notes were tentative, a simple melody picked out with one hand. But as the piano responded to his touch, something changed in his demeanor. His left hand joined in, adding harmonies to the simple tune. Olivia recognized it immediately. Debussy's Clair de Lune, its dreamy opening played with surprising sensitivity. Nathaniel's technique was rusty, with occasional hesitations and missed notes, but the musicality was unmistakable. This was no casual player, but someone who had once lived and breathed music. She remained perfectly still, afraid that drawing attention to the moment might break its spell. The piece gained momentum as Nathaniel remembered more, muscle memory returning with each measure. When he reached the climactic middle section, his fingers faltered, and he stopped abruptly. I've forgotten the rest, he said, voice tight with emotion. It was beautiful, Olivia said quietly. You play with feeling. He stared at the keys, not meeting her eyes. I studied at Curtis Institute before. He trailed off, then stood abruptly. The piano sounds much improved. Your work is exceptional. Before he could retreat behind his walls again, Olivia made a decision. She moved to the bench and sat, looking up at him. May I? At his nod, she began playing where he had stopped, continuing the Debussy with practiced ease. After a few measures, she nodded toward the space beside her. Join me? Perhaps it was the music already filling the room, or the lack of pressure in her invitation, but to her surprise, Nathaniel sat beside her. As she simplified her left-hand part, he tentatively added the melody line with his right. Their coordination was awkward at first, but gradually they found a rhythm together. When they reached the end of the piece, the final notes lingered in. The air between them, Olivia became acutely aware of his proximity, the slight warmth radiating from his arm, nearly touching hers. My mother died during my final recital at Curtis, Nathaniel said suddenly, his voice barely audible. Heart attack. I was playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 when it happened. I didn't know until after, when I found my father backstage instead of her. He stared at his hands. I haven't played since that night. Olivia's heart ached at the rawness in his voice. The piano became a memorial, a reminder of failure, he corrected. I was pursuing music while she was dying. She came to hear you play, Olivia said gently. That was her choice, to support what you loved. Nathaniel looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing beyond her practical clothes and work-roughened hands to something essential. How do you see through people so easily, Olivia Mercer? She smiled softly. The same way I see through pianos, I suppose. I listen for the notes between the notes." That evening, for the first time since her arrival, Nathaniel joined Olivia for dinner in the Manor's smaller dining room. Their conversation flowed from music to books to the intricate mechanics of pianos. And when he walked her to the East Wing afterward, the silence between them hummed with unspoken possibilities, like a perfectly tuned string waiting for the first resonant touch. Dissonant choices. The morning of the third week dawned with unusual clarity, sunlight streaming through the estate's windows as if nature itself approved of the piano's resurrection. Olivia arrived in the music room early, eager to begin the voicing process, the delicate art of shaping each hammer's felt to achieve the perfect tonal quality. This was the most subtle and artistic aspect of her work, where science gave way to intuition. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't notice Mrs. Hartwell until the housekeeper cleared her throat. "Miss Mercer, these arrived for you." She held out a thick cream-colored envelope. "And Mr. Reed asked if you would join him for lunch in the garden pavilion at noon." Olivia accepted the envelope with a puzzled smile. "Thank you." Left alone, she opened it to find an elegant invitation to the Reed Foundation's anniversary gala, now just 1 week away. Accompanying it was a handwritten note in Nathaniel's precise script. "The piano will need its restorer present to truly shine. N." Her heart gave a peculiar flutter that she immediately tried to suppress. The past few days had brought a noticeable shift in their relationship. After their impromptu duet, Nathaniel had begun spending hours in the music room, sometimes watching her work in comfortable silence, other times playing hesitant melodies that grew more confident by the day. Yesterday, they'd played a simple four-handed arrangement of a Mozart sonata, laughing at their mistakes with an ease that would have seemed impossible weeks earlier. But this invitation felt different, more formal, more public. A reminder of the world outside Reed Manor and their vastly different places within it. At noon, Olivia made her way through the garden to the glass-walled pavilion overlooking the property's small lake. Nathaniel was waiting, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, in a light blue shirt with rolled sleeves. "The piano is responding beautifully to the voicing," she said as she took her seat. "It has remarkable warmth in the middle register now." "I noticed," he replied, eyes crinkling slightly. "I may have spent an hour playing after you retired last night. You're regaining your confidence quickly. I had an excellent incentive." His gaze held hers for a moment before he looked away. "I've been thinking about the gala. Would you—" He was interrupted by the arrival of his assistant, a polished woman in her 40s who approached with an air of controlled urgency. "Mr. Reed, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt your lunch, but the Sydney team is on the line about the merger. They're threatening to walk if you don't personally address their concerns." Nathaniel's expression instantly transformed, the warmth receding behind a mask of cool efficiency. "Set up the call in my office. I'll be there in 5 minutes." As his assistant departed, he turned back to Olivia with a regretful smile. "Business never sleeps. Please enjoy lunch. We'll continue our conversation later." Left alone, Olivia picked at the elaborate meal, her thoughts troubled. Watching Nathaniel shift so completely into his billionaire persona had been jarring, a stark reminder of his other life, the one that existed beyond their musical sanctuary. After lunch, she returned to the music room and lost herself in work, carefully adjusting each hammer to bring out the piano's voice. Hours passed before she realized she was no longer alone. "I apologize for disappearing," Nathaniel said from the doorway. "The merger has been complicated." "No apology needed," Olivia replied, keeping her focus on the instrument. "This is your world. I'm just visiting." He approached, hands in pockets. "Is that how you see it?" She finally looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "Isn't it? In a few days, the piano will be finished. You'll host your gala Impress your wealthy friends, and I'll return to my workshop in Providence, back to our respective worlds. Something flickered across his face. Hurt, perhaps, or disappointment. I thought we'd moved beyond such simplified views of each other. Have we? Olivia set down her tools, suddenly needing to establish clarity. Nathaniel, what exactly is happening here? I think you know. He moved closer, his voice softening. These past weeks have been a pleasant interlude, she finished for him, a connection over shared love of music. But realistically— Don't tell me what's realistic, he interrupted, an edge entering his tone. I've had enough people in my life defining my limitations. That's not what I'm doing. Olivia stood, needing the equalizing effect of height. But I've watched enough wealthy patrons view craftspeople as amusing curiosities. The appreciation is genuine until they remember. The social divide— Nathaniel's expression hardened. Is that what you think of me? That I see you as some quaint diversion? I don't know what to think, she admitted. When your assistant arrived today, I saw a different person emerge. The tech mogul, the billionaire negotiator. That's your reality. And you've decided it. Can't include you, can it? Really? Olivia gestured around the grand room. This isn't my world, Nathaniel. I work with my hands. My apartment could fit in your entrance hall. The people at your gala probably spend more on wine than I earn in a month. He stepped closer, determination evident in every line of his body. Come to the gala as my guest, not as the piano restorer. The invitation hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to articulate. Before Olivia could respond, Nathaniel's phone rang with an insistence that suggested, "Another crisis. I need to take this," he said, frustration evident as he checked the screen. But this conversation isn't over. After he left, Olivia sat at the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys that had brought them together. The instrument was nearly restored to its full glory, each note singing with clarity and depth. But the harmony she and Nathaniel had begun to build felt suddenly precarious. That evening, instead of their now customary shared dinner, Mrs. Hartwell informed her that Mr. Reed had been called away to New York on urgent business. He would return the day before the gala. Alone in the massive house, Olivia tried to focus on finalizing the piano's restoration. But as she worked, doubts crept in like dissonant notes in a perfect progression. She'd allowed herself to forget, however briefly, the reality of their situations. Headlines she'd seen about Nathaniel Reed before meeting him resurfaced in her memory. His billions, his company's global influence, the socialites and models he'd reportedly dated. What could she possibly offer that he couldn't find in his own world? And more importantly, could she bear to become an accessory to his wealth, forever defined by her relationship to it, rather than her own skill and passion? On the third day of his absence, Olivia made a decision. She completed the restoration with meticulous care, leaving detailed maintenance instructions for the staff. Then she packed her tools and personal belongings, wrote a brief but professional note thanking Nathaniel for the opportunity to work on such a magnificent instrument, and called a taxi. As she waited in the grand foyer, Mrs. Hartwell appeared, her normally impassive face showing a flicker of concern. "You're leaving without saying goodbye to Mr. Reed." "The work is complete," Olivia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "And we both know I don't belong here." The housekeeper studied her for a long moment. "In 15 years of service to Mr. Reed, I've never seen him play the piano until you came. Never seen him laugh in the music room. Never heard him invite anyone to the gala as a personal guest." "Mrs. Hartwell, he'll be devastated you left." Without a word. Olivia's resolve wavered, but only momentarily. Sometimes the kindest thing is a clean break. We come from different worlds. Different worlds, Mrs. Hartwell repeated thoughtfully. Yet you both speak the same language when you sit at that piano. The taxi arrived before Olivia could formulate a response. As the gates of Reed Manor closed behind her, she told herself she was making the right choice for both of them. Yet, the ache in her chest felt suspiciously like the hollow emptiness of an abandoned piano, waiting for music that might never come again. Perfect harmony. The Reed Foundation's anniversary gala transformed the normally austere mansion into a glittering spectacle. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over the assembled elite of the business and philanthropic worlds, while quartet music floated through rooms now filled with animated conversation instead of silence. At the center of it all stood Nathaniel Reed, impeccable in a tailored tuxedo, performing the role of gracious host with practiced precision. To casual observers, he appeared the epitome of confident success. But Mrs. Hartwell, watching from the periphery, noted how his eyes repeatedly drifted toward the grand music room, where the restored Steinway waited in solitary splendor. Mr. Reed approached a silver-haired board member, champagne in hand. The Foundation's new educational initiative is brilliant. $5 million for music programs in underfunded schools. What inspired such a specific focus? Nathaniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. Music changes lives, sometimes by its presence, sometimes by its absence. Before the conversation could continue, his assistant appeared at his elbow. "Sir, it's nearly time for your address and the musical presentation." With a nod, Nathaniel excused himself and made his way through the crowd toward the music room. Guests followed, drawn by curiosity about the mysterious piano that had been mentioned in the invitation, a historic instrument with a story to be revealed. The music room, usually Nathaniel's private sanctuary, now held rows of elegant chairs, facing the Steinway. As guests settled in, he moved to stand beside the gleaming instrument, its ebony surface reflecting the warm lighting like a dark mirror. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice steady despite the emptiness. He felt, the Reed Foundation celebrates 5 years of working toward positive change. But tonight, I want to share something personal. His hand rested lightly on the piano's curved edge. This Steinway belonged to my grandfather, and later to my mother. For years after her death, I kept it silent, a memorial that gathered dust. Instead of creating music, I convinced myself that was respect. Murmurs rippled through the audience at this unexpectedly personal revelation from a man known for his privacy. "I was wrong," Nathaniel continued. "The true disrespect was denying the instrument its purpose. Music is meant to be shared, to connect us across the divides we create." His gaze swept the room, then returned to the piano. "I had planned a special performance tonight with the remarkable woman who restored not just this piano, but something in myself as well." A sudden commotion at the back of the room drew everyone's attention. Mrs. Hartwell stood in the doorway, her normally composed face alight with urgency. Behind her stood Olivia Mercer, slightly breathless, dressed in a simple but elegant emerald gown that complemented her auburn hair, now loose around her shoulders instead of in its practical workday bun. Nathaniel froze mid-sentence, his carefully constructed facade cracking at the sight of her. For 3 interminable seconds, they simply looked at each other across the crowded room, oblivious to the curious glances of the assembled guests. Then, without finishing his speech, Nathaniel moved toward her with purposeful strides. The crowd parted instinctively before him, sensing the importance of the moment. "You came," he said when he reached her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Mrs. Hartwell can be very persuasive," Olivia replied, her voice equally quiet. "She showed up at my workshop with a dress and a car. Remind me to give her a substantial raise." His eyes searched hers. "Why did you leave?" "Fear," she admitted simply. "Not of your world, of losing myself in it, of becoming an ornament instead of a craftsman." Understanding dawned in his expression. "That would never happen." Your hands built something beautiful from what was broken. I wouldn't change a single callus on them. A small smile tugged at her lips. I also realized something after I left. Hiding in my workshop, refusing to cross the bridge between our worlds. That's no different from you refusing to play after your mother died. We both retreated to what felt safe. Around them, the guests waited with barely concealed curiosity. The wealthy and powerful temporarily relegated to the role of audience in a more compelling drama. I announced we would perform together tonight, Nathaniel said, a question in his eyes. Then we shouldn't disappoint them. Olivia's smile widened, though I didn't exactly prepare. He took her hand, her work-roughened, skilled, beautiful hand, and led her toward the piano. Whispers followed them, guests wondering who this unknown woman might be, but neither paid any attention. Ladies and gentlemen, Nathaniel addressed the room once more, his voice stronger now. I'd like to introduce Olivia Mercer, master piano restorer, and the woman who reminded me that some silences need to be broken. As they sat together at the bench, Olivia whispered, "What shall we play?" "Something that tells our story," he replied, his fingers finding their place on the keyboard with newfound confidence. The first notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the room, the piece Nathaniel had been playing when his mother died. But instead of the full orchestral arrangement, this was an intimate four-hand version, with Olivia providing the supporting harmonies as Nathaniel finally reclaimed the melody he had abandoned years ago. The audience sat transfixed as the music swelled around them, watching the unlikely pair move in perfect synchronization. Where Nathaniel's technique faltered, Olivia's seamlessly covered. Where her interpretation hesitated, his carried forward. They created something neither could have achieved alone, a performance not of technical perfection, but of raw, emotional truth. In the most challenging passage, Nathaniel briefly lost his place. Without missing a beat, Olivia caught his eye and nodded encouragingly. He found his way back into the music, their fingers occasionally brushing as they navigated the complex interplay of melody and harmony. As they reached the concerto's triumphant conclusion, the final chords resonated through the room with such power that several guests were visibly moved to tears. The applause that followed was thunderous, the sophisticated audience rising to their feet in spontaneous appreciation, but Nathaniel and Olivia barely registered the standing ovation. In the private world they had created between them, only one thing mattered. The realization that they had both finally found someone who understood their truest language. "I've been thinking," Nathaniel said as they acknowledged the applause with modest nods, "about your concerns regarding our different worlds. Have you?" Olivia's eyes held a hint of wariness still. The Reed Foundation's new music initiative needs a director, someone who understands both the artistic and technical aspects of musical education. Someone passionate about bringing music to those who might otherwise never experience it. Understanding dawned in her expression. A position that would value my expertise, not my connection to you. Exactly. Though I admit the connection would be a very pleasant bonus. His smile turned serious. Your world and mine don't have to remain separate, Olivia. We can build something new between them. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the mansion had returned to its usual quiet state, Nathaniel and Olivia sat alone at the piano once more. But this time, instead of playing, they simply talked about possibilities, fears, hopes, and the unexpected journey that had brought them together. "I came to restore a piano," Olivia mused, her hand resting lightly atop his on the keyboard. "I never imagined that you'd restore its owner as well," Nathaniel finished, turning his hand to intertwine their fingers. "Something like that," she smiled, "though I think perhaps we restored each other." He lifted their joined hands, examining the contrast between them, his smooth and manicured, hers strong and marked by her craft. Different, yet perfectly complementary. Like a piano, he observed, harmony requires both the black and white keys. Outside the tall windows, dawn was beginning to break over the grounds of Reed Manor. The first light illuminated the music room, no longer a shrine to lost memories, but a space vibrant with new possibilities. On the Steinway's gleaming surface lay the program from the previous night's gala, announcing the Foundation's commitment to bringing music education to underserved communities, a mission that would merge Nathaniel's resources with Olivia's. Passion and expertise, the piano that had once stood silent in a billionaire's empty mansion would now help create music in the most unexpected places. And the hands that had restored it, one pair shaped by privilege, the other by craft, would work together to build bridges neither could have imagined just weeks before. As the new day's light filled the room, Nathaniel gently kissed Olivia's palm, a gesture of reverence for the skills she had brought into his life. In return, she touched his face with those same work-worn hands, acknowledging the man beneath the wealth who had found the courage to play again. Some stories end with grand declarations or dramatic gestures. But for Nathaniel and Olivia, the truest expression of their connection came in the simple act of sitting side by side at the piano as morning broke, playing a gentle melody together. Two different worlds finding perfect harmony at last.